She shoved a crooked log deeper into the woodpile, her breath showing in the cold morning air. Her hands were red and cracked from the wind, and one of her sleeves had come undone again, flapping loose like a flag that had seen too many storms. May didn't mind the cold so much. What got to her was the quiet. The kind of quiet that settled deep in your chest when no one had spoken your name out loud in days. The ranch sat on a lonely patch of land an hour's ride from the nearest town, if you had a good horse. She didn't. Just a skinny mule named Nell who kicked more than she walked. May wasn't stacking wood because she wanted to. She did it because it had to be done. If you didn't do it, you'd freeze, and if you froze, nobody came looking. She learned that last winter when her father's lungs gave out in the middle of a storm and the snow kept falling like the sky was trying to bury him right there in the cabin. She wrapped him in canvas, dragged him out behind the barn, and kept going. The land had a way of deciding who stayed and who broke. From across the field, a man sat his horse just where the tree line began to thin. He hadn't moved for over an hour, just watched. May had seen him the moment he stopped there, but she didn't let on. You learn not to show what you noticed. She dealt with men before, some wanting directions, others wanting more. This one didn't look like the usual. His clothes were too clean for a drifter, but he carried himself like a man who had nowhere to be. His horse was a sturdy bay with a faded saddle. The rider wore a wide-brimmed hat that shaded most of his face, but she caught glimpses when he turned slightly toward the light. He wasn't young, but not too old either. Somewhere in his 30s, she guessed. Not a lawman, not a bounty hunter, just a man who looked tired of being around people, but even more tired of being alone. She knew the look she saw in the mirror each morning. May grabbed another log. Her wrist ached. The man didn't approach. That was strange. Most men looking for something would have come forward by now. Instead, he just stayed there, watching the way a child might watch a fire burn down, not quite sure if they wanted to poke it back to life. May didn't wave, didn't speak. She didn't know anyone to welcome. She heard her mother's voice sometimes, faint now, like wind through tall grass. Don't trust a man just because he smiles soft. Wounded things bite worst. Her mother hadn't lived long enough to see May bury her sister, or to see her father waste away. Just one hard winter, and all of it was hers now. The land, the debts, the silence. Inside, the cabin still smelled of old oil and ash. Nothing lived in it except the cat that didn't have a name. Sometimes May thought about giving it one, but the idea of naming something felt too final, like claiming something for good. Nothing stayed long enough for that. The man shifted on his horse. May saw it from the corner of her eye. He wasn't leaving. That much was clear. She reached for the last armful of wood and carried it toward the porch. Her legs were stiff from the cold, her steps slow. The man still made no move to come closer. She hated herself for wondering what he wanted. He wasn't handsome in the usual sense, but there was something about the way he looked at her, steady, not expecting anything. He had the kind of face that had seen hard things and stopped trying to hide it. Something in that gave her pause. A man like that didn't come all the way out here for no reason. May set the wood down and looked straight at him now, letting her face show nothing. If he meant trouble, she'd meet it head on. The man tipped his hat, just a small motion. Then he turned his horse and began to ride away, slow and quiet through the frost. May stood there, her heart thudding for no reason she could explain. He hadn't said a word, hadn't even come close, but something in her gut twisted like a knot. He'd be back. He'd looked at her like he already knew the kind of ache she carried, the kind that didn't come from loss, but from carrying too much of it for too long. She stepped inside and shut the door behind her. The cold would come again soon, and the roof still leaked near the chimney. There was no time to worry about ghosts on horseback, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking, and that quiet that used to feel like safety now pressed on her chest like a weight. The man was gone, but not really. Out there, something had shifted. She felt at the moment he looked at her like she wasn't just part of the land, like she mattered. And God help her, a part of her wanted him to come back, even if he brought more hurt with him. The next morning, May found boot tracks in the frost near the chicken coop. Not hers. She'd been too tired the night before to notice much. Only that the firewood stack hadn't been touched, and she'd locked the door behind her like always. But now, seeing the crisp outline of a man's tread curving around the edge of her barn, her stomach clenched. He hadn't knocked, hadn't even left a mark on the porch. Just came close enough to circle the place, like a coyote testing a fence. She stared at the prints for a long moment, then wiped them away with her boot. Whatever he wanted, he hadn't taken it. And maybe that scared her more. That same morning, old Mabel Hart rode up the trail with her boy, Eli, perched sideways on the saddle behind her. May hadn't seen them since spring thaw, when the Hart's mule had broken its leg and Eli had tried to shoot himself, only to end up sick from the blood. Mabel always rode hard, eyes narrowed like she expected someone to cheat her by sundown. She dismounted before the horse fully stopped and handed May a jar of honey without a word. That was how she said thank you, or sorry, or maybe both. You seen anyone out this way? Mabel asked, glancing toward the tree line. May shook her head. No one worth naming. Mabel squinted at her. Saw a stranger 2 nights back. Quiet type. Big hat. Asked after old Gus's ranch. Gus died last year. I told him that. He just nodded. Didn't say where he was headed next. But he had a war rifle slung across his saddle. Didn't like the look in his eyes. May didn't flinch. Most folks don't carry war rifles unless they got memories they can't forget. Mabel studied her a moment. You still got the shotgun your daddy left. May nodded. Keep it loaded. When the Harts left, May watched the dust trail vanish. The jar of honey still cold in her hands. That night, she heard Nell braying hard from the pen. By the time she got out there, lantern raised, a man was already inside the fence, holding the mule's harness with one hand, talking low to calm her. It was him, the same man from the tree line. May raised the lantern higher. You lost. He turned to her, calm, the way you'd turn toward someone you already expected to see. No, ma'am. Just needed a place to rest the horse a while. Her fingers curled tighter around the lantern handle. You've had a whole county to rest in. Not like this, he said quietly. There's peace here. May felt herself stiffen. Peace. That's what he called it. The kind of silence that kept you up at night and made your own thoughts sound like thunder. She studied him in the yellow light. His coat was worn but clean. His boots were cracked but solid. He had a scar just below his right cheek, thin and pale like an old memory. What do you want? He didn't smile. Just work. May frowned. I ain't asking for charity. I'll fix what needs fixing. Chop wood. Mend fences. I don't talk much. And I don't stay where I ain't welcome. She hesitated. There was a broken hinge on the barn door that had been threatening to fall for weeks. The back pasture fence had a section down where coyotes had been slipping through at night. The roof still leaked, and the winter grain needed moving. Too much work for one person. But May had never let a man inside her gate since her father died. Not because she couldn't defend herself, but because some kinds of wounds don't bleed on the outside. Name? She asked. Nate. She nodded once. You sleep in the hay loft. You don't come to the cabin unless I say. You leave when I tell you. You understand? He nodded. I do. May didn't sleep that night. Not really. She left her shotgun near the door and the lantern burning low. Every sound from the barn made her heart hammer. But nothing happened. No footsteps. No voices. Just the wind shifting through the dry grass and the low grumble of Nell when she kicked her stall in her sleep. By morning, the barn door was fixed. Nate was out early chopping wood like he'd done his whole life. May brought him water, left it by a stump, and walked away without a word. She didn't thank him. She didn't ask about his past. But she watched. Over the next few days, he didn't push. He fixed what he saw broken. He worked sunup to sundown. He didn't ask questions. But May noticed how he stood sometimes, shoulders stiff like he was bracing for a blow that never came. Or how he paused when the wind picked up, as if waiting for a sound from long ago. Then there was the old ledger May found tucked under the loose floorboard in the barn. It wasn't hers. Hadn't belonged to her father either. It had a page torn out and the rest written in careful, slanted script. Names, dates, towns, and at the top, barely legible judgment list. She didn't ask him about it that night. Instead, she went out back and sat with the shotgun across her lap, waiting to feel something that would tell her who Nate really was. That same week, Eli Hart came riding hard up the trail, breathless and bleeding from a cut across his cheek. His mother had gone into town, and a pair of men had come to the Hart ranch asking after something buried out on Dry Ridge. Eli hadn't known what they meant, but they'd hit him anyway. They cleaned his wound while Nate stood quietly by, eyes dark and still. Eli kept glancing up at him like trying to place a face from a dream. "You seen him before?" Nate asked low. Eli shook his head. One had a cross burned into his coat, like a brand. May's eyes flicked toward Nate, but his face didn't change. Later that night, when Eli had been sent back with a note pinned to his coat for Mabel, May found Nate sitting behind the barn with his hands pressed together like he was praying. She didn't speak. "I knew that brand," he said after a long silence. "It's not a sign of religion. It's a mark some men used after the war. A way to track debts, or kill in God's name." "You rode with them?" "I rode against them." He looked at her, eyes steady, but it all bled together after a while. "I couldn't tell the difference anymore. I walked away after it ended. Thought I'd outrun the weight of it." May didn't answer. She didn't need to. She understood. Everyone out here carried something. The land didn't let you forget. But now she was wondering why he'd come here. Why now? Why her? Because secrets didn't just follow people. Sometimes they were the reason they showed up in the first place. May knew something was coming. She could feel it in her bones the way a ranch dog senses a storm long before the clouds roll in. The days had grown shorter, the light thinner, but it wasn't the season that was shifting. It was the silence between her and Nate. He still worked like he had a ghost chasing him, still didn't speak more than needed. But something about his eyes had changed. They watched the woods too closely now, listened too hard when the wind moved just right. One morning, she found him sharpening a blade before sunrise, crouched by the shed with a calm, too still to be peaceful. "You expecting something?" she asked. He didn't look up. "I always expect something." That should have unnerved her. Instead, it left her restless. She'd grown used to him in ways that startled her. We didn't come back from the ridge by dusk. She noticed. When he left the tools arranged in that exact, precise way, she followed his rhythm without thinking. He took up space in her life the way water creeps into cracks, quiet, slow, and dangerous if ignored. Then the men came back. 3 of them this time. They rode hard through the low valley, cutting the frost with iron hooves and bad intent. May saw them from her window before she heard them, and something in her stomach sank. These weren't men looking to trade or talk. These were the kind of men who didn't knock before they broke things. She grabbed a shotgun, stepped onto the porch, and saw Nate already out front, rifle in hand, still and centered like he'd been waiting all morning. The man in front, the one with the cross-burnt coat, smiled like he was standing over a grave. "Afternoon," he called, though there was no friendliness in it. "You got a man here goes by Nathaniel Wade?" May didn't flinch. "I got a man here goes by don't ask stupid questions." The second rider chuckled, but it was Nate who stepped forward. "That's enough, May." She turned sharply. He never said her name before. Not like that. He walked past her slowly and faced them head on. "What do you want?" The lead man leaned forward in his saddle. "You already know. You left something behind, and someone's been paying the price ever since." May's jaw tensed. The man continued. 5 names were written in your hand, Wade. We buried 3. One talked. Said you were living soft somewhere north. Said you were with a woman now. May felt her blood chill. This wasn't just about a fight. This was history coming for blood. "You gonna run again?" The man sneered. "Were you gonna watch her die, like the others?" May raised the shotgun fast. "You try anything, you'll be on your back before you hit the ground." Nate didn't move. His face had turned hard. Not scared. Not angry. Just tired. Deeply tired. "You need to leave," he said. "You don't get to give orders anymore." There was no shooting. Not yet. Just the kind of silence that screams through the body before violence. Eventually, they turned their horses and rode off, slow, like they weren't done yet. That night, May confronted Nate in the barn. What did they mean? He didn't lie. There was a list, he said. After the war, some of us decided to clean up what was left behind. Raiders, killers, men who turned savage. We called it justice, but it turned into something else. We weren't choosing right from wrong anymore. We were just choosing who died first. You killed them. I tried to stop it. I tried to leave, but they followed me. Said I owed them one last job. I ran, and they kept digging up the past. May stared at him. You brought this to my land. He met her gaze, nothing hidden. I did, and I'm sorry. She wanted to scream, to hit him, but she didn't. She just turned and walked out, slamming the barn door so hard the horses startled. That was the night she stopped sleeping. The days passed with tension thick as barbed wire. May couldn't look at him without seeing ghosts behind his eyes. Nate didn't press her. He worked like he always had, but the quiet between them now was filled with things neither could say. One morning, a letter came, left on the fence post. No writer in sight. May opened it with shaking hands. Inside were names, dates, and a drawing of her. Crude but clear. They knew who she was now. Nate found her sitting on the porch steps, the paper crumpled in her fist. She didn't speak, just looked up with tearless eyes. I never asked for this. I know. I built this alone. I buried my whole family and kept this place running by the skin of my teeth. I let you in because I was tired of being alone. And now they know my name. Nate knelt in front of her, but she looked away. I can't undo what I did, he said, but I can finish it. I don't need a man to die for me. I need one who doesn't bring war to my door. The line cut deep, but he didn't flinch. I'll go, he said. She didn't stop him. That night, he packed his rifle, saddlebag, and coat. Left before sunrise. May watched from the window, unseen. The barn felt empty. The fields felt wider. And her chest felt hollow in a way she hadn't expected. But she didn't cry. Not until 2 days later, when Eli came running again. This time not bleeding, but pale and panicked. They torched Mabel's wagon, he said. She's fine, but there's a message carved into the side. He hesitated. It said she's next. May didn't need to ask who she meant. She saddled Nell and rode hard. When she got to the ridge, she found one of the men from that day dead. Body stripped, face bruised, gun still in his hand. Nate had done it. He was hunting them one by one. The twist wasn't that he left. It was that he meant to finish the job without her knowing, without dragging her deeper. But they were already circling closer. And now, May wasn't sure if he was trying to save her or if she needed to save him. The smoke from Mabel's ruined wagon still hung in the air when May returned to the cabin, her cheeks raw from wind and fear. She hadn't seen Nate, hadn't found a note, no sign of where he'd gone after killing that man on the ridge. But she could feel it all pressing down, the weight of the war he'd dragged to her door, the eyes watching her from somewhere in the trees, the breath of violence coming closer. That night, she sat at the kitchen table long after the fire died. Her shotgun lay across her knees, and she didn't even try to sleep. Her land, her quiet, her hard-won peace, it was all at stake now. Every step Nate had taken toward her life was unraveling what little control she'd managed to build. By morning, she made a choice. She packed supplies into her saddlebags, tied a blanket down behind the saddle, and left a note for Mabel in case things went bad. May had never gone looking for anyone before. Folks came to her. She was the kind of woman people either needed help from or left alone. But now she was the one riding into something unknown, and every mile felt like pushing deeper into a dark mouth that might not spit her back out. She found the second body outside the old church ruins south of Dry Ridge. Another of the cross-burned men, stripped of his weapons, rope burns around his wrists. Someone had tied him before killing him. Execution, not defense. Nate was getting colder, sharper. She remembered the way he sat in the barn those last nights. Too still, like he wasn't in his body anymore. A man hollowed out by guilt. And now she was chasing a man who might not come back from what he was trying to finish. She caught up to him just after dusk on the edge of a dry creek bed. He was kneeling by a fire, face drawn, skin dirty. He didn't look surprised when she approached, just tired. "I told you to stay back," he said. "I told you I don't take orders." He gave a faint shake of his head. "It gets worse from here, May." She climbed down from Nell and tied her quietly. "You think I don't know what worse looks like? I've seen my family die in pieces. I've buried too many to be scared of men with guns. What I'm scared of is you turning into the thing they said you were." His jaw tensed. "I was never like them." "No," she said softly. "But killing like this, you'll end up standing where they stood. And I'll lose you too, even if you walk back." That silence between them was worse than yelling. He stared into the fire. "They killed a woman in Kansas. She'd helped me hide once. She and her boy. I found the bodies after. I promised myself I'd bury every man who had a hand in it." May crouched beside him. "And when they're all dead?" He didn't answer. Because he didn't know. Because vengeance didn't end. It just burned everything in its path. She stayed with him that night. No fire. Just quiet. She didn't touch him. Didn't try to stop him. Just stayed so he wouldn't be alone with the weight. The next morning, they rode out together. They didn't speak much. Just kept moving. Nate tracked the third man through the pass, all the way to the edge of Wilker's Bluff, a mining town gone rotten. May knew that place. Her father used to say only two kinds of people went there: those with nothing to lose and those too stupid to know they were about to. The man was holed up in an old saloon with a half dozen others, all of them drinking like they hadn't killed anyone yesterday. Nate watched from the alley. "I go in alone." May blocked his path. "No, not this time. I can't protect you in there. I'm not here to be protected. I'm here to end this before it ends you." They moved fast through the back, guns drawn. The saloon was loud with shouting and whiskey. No one saw it coming until it was too late. The man with the brand on his coat stood up fast, hand going for his pistol. May shot him in the shoulder before he got close. Nate handled the rest. Quick, brutal. 2 men down before the others even ran. By the time the dust settled, there were 4 bodies on the floor and a bottle rolling across the boards. May's hand shook. She didn't look away from the dead. "I didn't come to kill," she whispered, "but I won't watch them hunt us." Nate wiped blood from his face and nodded once. Not proud, not broken, just spent. They left town by the side road, riding hard into the dusk. Back at the cabin, nothing had been touched, but the mailbox post had been hacked into. A blade, clean cut. Another message. May sat on the porch that night, shotgun in her lap. Nate beside her with his rifle across his knees. "This doesn't end here, does it?" she asked. "No." She looked up at the stars, her voice small. "I used to believe the land could protect you if you gave it enough of yourself. Now I wonder if it just takes until there's nothing left." He didn't answer, because some questions weren't meant for answering. They were still together, still breathing. But something had shifted. The cost had gone up, and they were both starting to feel the price. It was near midnight when May woke to the sound of gravel shifting beneath heavy boots. The fire had burned low, throwing long shadows across the cabin walls. She reached for the shotgun on instinct, heart thudding, breath tight in her chest. Nate wasn't in his cot. The door creaked open and the wind pushed in cold and sharp, like something had followed it in from the dark. She stepped outside barefoot, the shotgun raised, and found him in the yard, standing in the glow of the lantern he'd lit, his back to her, shoulders rigid. At his feet lay a man, bound and bleeding, a black cloth over his head. The last of the branded men. The one who had carved May's name into a fence post and tried to smoke her out of her own life. Nate didn't look at her. He was waiting near the creek bed, watching the house. May swallowed. "You brought him here. I wasn't going to let him run again. I want him to face what he's done." She moved slowly toward the man. "And what exactly did he do to you?" Nate's silence dragged too long. When he finally spoke, it came in pieces. "I lied to you," he said, "about what I was, what I did with those men." May felt her jaw tighten. "You told me you rode against them." "I did. At first." He finally turned toward her. His eyes didn't plead. They didn't even blink. But there were moments, nights where we burned whole farms just because someone gave us a wrong name. We called it justice. We told ourselves it was for the good of the country. But all it was revenge wrapped up in lawmen's coats. May's breath hitched. You killed innocents. Yes. His voice didn't shake. And I ran when I couldn't live with it anymore. I left them, but I didn't stop them. I just walked away. She looked at the man tied up on the ground, now groaning through the cloth. Blood was soaking through his shirt where Nate had struck him. And now you brought him here. To me. He was going to kill you. Maybe, she said coldly. But you already did something worse. You gave him a reason to. Nate dropped his gaze. May's hands were trembling now, but she didn't lower the shotgun. I'll let you into my life. I'll let myself believe you were someone who could come through something dark and still be good. But you brought that darkness with you. You never left it. He looked at her then, really looked, and she saw a flicker of something fall on his face, something like surrender. I'll take him and leave, he said. I won't come back. I won't ask you to forgive me. She stared at him, the weight of the past months crashing down. All the quiet mornings, the silence they'd shared, the work, the watching. The moments she let herself believe she wasn't alone anymore. You don't get to decide how this ends, she whispered. Not anymore. She walked over and pulled the cloth from the man's face. He was older than she expected, gray around the edges, his face sunken and mean, eyes still flicking with fear and hate. But human and scared. What's your name? She asked. He spit blood to the side. Wade's whore got a voice now. She hit him with the butt of the shotgun. Hard. He didn't speak after that. I want to know everything, she said, turning to Nate. Every name. Every place. I want to know who else might still be out there. I'm not running from this, and neither are you. Nate nodded. There's one more, he said quietly. Their leader. The one who branded them. He disappeared years ago, but they said he came back west. Started calling himself Marshall Doyle. Runs law out of Benham Pass. May's stomach dropped. Benham Pass was 2 days' ride. A town with a sheriff, a jail, and a church bell that hadn't stopped ringing since before the war ended. That's why they were looking for you, she whispered. He sent them. Nate didn't answer. He didn't have to. May paced, heart racing, mind splintering. If we leave now, if we ride hard, I'm not asking you to come. I'm not asking for permission. They left at dawn, left the bound man tied to the porch post with a note nailed to his chest. Try again and you'll wish I'd killed you. The ride to Benham Pass was cold and brutal. Neither spoke much, but the silence was different now, shared, deliberate. There were things between them still broken, still sharp, but they didn't bleed from them anymore. They moved like people who knew they were at the end of something, whether it ended in blood or in mercy. Benham Pass was quiet when they arrived. Too quiet. The town's main street stretched long and dusty, shadows sitting thick along the walls. At the far end, just beneath the church steeple, stood the sheriff's office. Newer wood, brighter windows. And out front, leaning against the railing, was a man in a gray hat and a red scarf. Watching. That's him, Nate said. May nodded. You still sure? He asked. She turned her face toward him, fierce and calm. Let's finish it. They walked side by side, slow and steady. No rush. No hiding. The man saw them coming, stood straight, a slight limp in his left leg. His eyes never left Nate's. When they stopped just 10 paces away, he gave a smile that didn't touch his eyes. Well, the man said, if it ain't the ghost. May stepped forward first. You branded men and sent them to my land. The man looked her up and down. And you must be the one who made Wade soft. I made him honest. That a fact. She shot him in the leg before he could reach for his gun. He dropped hard, screaming, clutching his thigh. Nate stepped forward, kicked the gun away, and leveled his rifle at the man's face. But he didn't shoot. He looked down at the man who had made him a monster, who'd used the war as an excuse to burn through people like they were already dead. Tell them the truth, Nate said. Tell them what you did. What we did. The man coughed blood. You really think they'll care? You think anyone here wants to remember the war? May crouched beside him. No, but they'll remember this. She grabbed the red scarf and pulled it free, revealing the faded cross burn beneath his collar. Then she stood and faced the gathering crowd that had begun to gather in the doorway of the general store and the post office. This man isn't a lawman. He's a killer hiding behind a badge. It didn't take long. Once the truth began to spread, others added their pieces. Old stories, rumors long buried. The church bell stopped ringing that afternoon. The badge was stripped from his chest, and he was dragged into the very jail he built. May and Nate left town without a word. That night, they made camp beside a frozen creek. Neither slept much. "You didn't kill him," she said quietly. "No," Nate replied, "because you reminded me I didn't need to." They sat in silence, the fire low between them. "You're not the man you were," May said, "but you're not the man I need you to be yet." "I know, but you could be." He nodded, not with pride, but with a kind of hope that hurt to look at. She leaned back against the log, her fingers brushing the edge of his sleeve. "Then let's see what's left when the killing stops." And for the first time since he rode on her land, Nate Wade smiled without sorrow. Snow began falling just days after they returned. Not the kind that blew sideways with rage, but soft flakes that settled slowly on the rooftops, fences, and tree limbs, like the land was trying to cover what had been done. May stood on the porch in her coat and gloves, arms crossed tight, watching the way the snow smoothed the rough edges of the cabin roof Nate had helped patch up in late summer. For the first time in months, there was nothing waiting just beyond the trees. No boots in the frost, no letters nailed to posts, just quiet. The bound man Nate had left behind on the porch never came back. Mabel said he'd been found wandering toward the river trail, barefoot and babbling about ghosts. Ben Pass had changed, too. The marshal they unseated had been replaced by a young deputy with clean eyes and steady hands, someone too new to carry the weight of secrets just yet. The town didn't thank them. Not exactly. Folks don't clap for hard truths. But word got around, and people stopped looking at Nate like he was a danger. They looked at him like he'd walked through fire and hadn't lost himself to it. May still kept the shotgun by the door. Not out of fear anymore, just habit. Some parts of a person don't go away when the war ends. And she fought her own kind of war for so long. Her muscles only knew how to brace. But slowly things began to shift. The barn didn't creak at night like it used to. The mule stopped kicking the boards every time someone walked by. The wind still howled, but it wasn't the kind that carried voices anymore. Nate stayed. He didn't ask to. He didn't beg. He simply took the spare room in the loft and never moved out. He worked the fields, mended the tools, and fixed the window that had never quite shut all the way. Some nights they talked by the fire. Other nights they didn't. Sometimes he read from old books her mother had left, and May would pretend she wasn't listening while she shelled beans or stitched a torn coat. His voice had a low rumble that soothed more than it should have. Other times, he'd sit on the porch long after she'd gone to bed, staring out into the dark like waiting for something to come back. Or maybe waiting to forgive himself. One morning, May found her old ledger sitting on the table, open to a blank page. A new list had begun. Fence repair, west gate. Hinge, cellar door. New boots for May, size 2 small-ass pair. She stared at the handwriting for a long time. It wasn't just a list. It was a kind of vow, written in everyday chores. She didn't say anything when she found it, just turned to the stove and added more coffee to the pot. Weeks passed, and with them came the small healing things. Mabel and Eli began stopping by again, sometimes with eggs, sometimes with gossip. May taught the mule to take a blanket without biting. She planted onions before the thaw was fully over, knowing full well they might not take, but planting something anyway. That was new. Then one evening, as they sat by the fire, May broke the silence without warning. "I still think about what you did." Nate didn't ask which part. He just nodded. "I think about what might have happened if you'd never stopped writing. If you'd become like him, the man in Benton Pass." "I was halfway there," he said. "But you turned around." His face stayed quiet. "Not everyone gets that chance." You gave it to yourself, she replied. That counts. They didn't speak for a while. The fire snapped. The wind moved gently against the windows. And then she added, softer, I think I still believe in you. That made him turn toward her. And in his eyes, she saw not relief, but grief. The kind that came when someone finally realized they weren't beyond forgiveness. I'll spend every day trying to deserve that, he said. She reached for his hand then, not out of romance, not out of pity, just a steady human need to anchor something. And he didn't pull away. That spring, they rebuilt the chicken coop. Not because it needed it, because they both needed to make something new. They never called what they had love, not out loud. But it moved through the house the way sunlight slipped through cracked shutters, slow, warm, and hard to ignore. And yet, not everything healed. May still had nights where she woke choking on her breath, dreaming of smoke and footsteps that weren't there. Nate still disappeared some mornings without warning, coming back with muddy boots and a tired look like he'd been walking through memories. They didn't apologize for those things, didn't try to explain. They let each other break quietly when needed, and built one another back up with simple things. Coffee, a fresh coat of oil on the axe, a blanket left at the foot of the bed. One day in early summer, May rode into town alone, just to trade, just to breathe. She walked past a group of travelers, strangers looking for work, and overheard one of them muttering a name, Wade. She froze. Used to ride with some rough men, the stranger was saying. But they say he turned, killed his own commander, walked into a marshal's town and brought the man to justice. Is he dead? Someone asked. No, the traveler replied. Worse, they say he found peace. May smiled to herself and kept walking. When she got home, she found Nate hammering a new board across the barn door, muttering under his breath about crooked nails. She didn't tell him what she'd heard, just stood beside him and held the nails steady when his hand started to shake. Sometimes, redemption doesn't look like a sermon or a grand act. Sometimes it looks like a man who once did terrible things building a chicken coop straight and true, and the woman beside him making sure the door doesn't stick. By autumn, the fields had turned gold and red, and the cabin was full of stored grain and warm wool. May sat on the porch again, a blanket over her knees, and watched the sun sink over her land. Not his, not anyone else's, hers. But when Nate came and sat beside her, she reached out, took his hand, and didn't let go. Because some things, like land, like peace, aren't meant to be claimed. They're meant to be shared. And in the long, quiet stretch of dusk, where memory and regret once lived, May and Nate sat without speaking, listening to the wind. It didn't carry ghosts anymore, just the sound of a new kind of life. One earned, not given. One built slow like trust, like forgiveness. And out there, in the cold heart of the West, that was enough.